There's two principles in this design and build process, right? One's co-creation and another one is experimentation. Culture, all the culture is company values that get brought to life through behaviors, systems and processes and symbols. If your value is customer service, let's say, we design how we work to make sure that they're in the interest of us and our teams, but they also are about doing the best for our customer. If I think about the way we've designed our framework for the implementation, right? The first step of the whole framework, we talk about it is
Hello, heroes of hybrid work. I'm Jenny Mobius and an SVP at Skeda, where I'm lucky I get to help organizations bring their hybrid workspaces to life every day. Part of that mission includes bringing you the latest data and insights from today's top voices, researchers, and business leaders so you can make the best decisions for your business. On today's pod, Maja Paleka, co-founder of Juggle Strategies, whose mission is to make flexible work business as usual, shares why her engineering background gives her a unique perspective on applying design principles to hybrid work challenges, how a multinational insurance organization learned that hybrid decisions were best made at the team level, why unstructured time is so important when on site, and why clarity, autonomy, and accountability are the keys to hybrid work success. So Maja, thank you so much for joining us on Heroes of Hybrid Work. We are very, very excited to have you here with us today from Sydney, Australia, which is really the other side of the world for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really fun to get to talk about this, and especially when it is across the world as well. So my name is Maja Paleka. I'm one of the co-founders and I'm a director at Juggle Strategies. And Juggle is an organization three of us started in 2015. So even though hybrid and flexible work and really ways of working, I guess, is probably our preferred way of describing it, even from the time that we were doing it, was something that we did long time before COVID. All three of us come from not necessarily an HR background, but have just run teams in different capacities and different types of roles, from sales, engineering, all that kind of other stuff. And we were looking at the way that people were working, and we thought we were missing an opportunity, and we were kind of missing the point a little bit on the conversation. At that time, flexible work was really what everybody talked about. Mm-hmm. There was a little bit of a conversation about, working moms, really, if we're honest. It was, how do we offer flexibility for, and if you were progressive parents, to be able to integrate work and life. And from our perspective, it was so much more than that. Nick Bloom had even done the research in terms of C-Trip and everything else way pre-COVID. And we knew some of the research that when flexibility is done right, that there are some incredible opportunities in terms of how organizations work. And if knowledge work is what a lot of us were doing more and more, how we design the way that we work just wasn't fit for purpose anymore. If every single brain is just coming into the office 9 to 5, is that the best way for every single one of us to do our work? Probably not. So that was where we were coming from. And then, everything in the last few years that happened. So it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah. That's great. So a little bit about Skeda. We also existed way before the pandemic, and we serviced a lot of athletic fields. For booking athletic fields. And I don't know if you know about us, because we were founded in Melbourne, but COVID hit, and all of a sudden workplaces really needed help with booking desks and having enough space in between desks and making sure we were all healthy. And so that's when it really took off. It existed, but that's when, the market really called for it. So we have similar stories in that way. I loved reading your LinkedIn posts. And one of the things that popped out to me is that you said that once an engineer, always an engineer. And I really thought it a unique take on how you think about designing and building workplaces. And so could you tell me a little bit more about how your engineering mindset has actually shaped your thought processes?
Yeah, it was funny. I just noticed that it was coming out in my language every time I was speaking to the clients. And when it did, it sort of made sense. Our whole philosophy, and I think that pretty much, when you look at all the thought leaders in the space, we're all coming to the same place, is that hybrid is something that has to be intentionally designed, right? It is not going to happen just because you told people to be in the office 2 days a week, right? It's just not. And so, okay, so if we start from that point of view, then what does that mean, right? And thinking about that from that perspective, well, it means that you first figure out, what am I even designing for? And what am I trying to achieve here? Yeah, it starts with the mission of the organization, and then thinks about the culture of the organization, thinks about the people, thinks about the work to be done. So you have sort of these design principles, right? If we're kind of looking at it from that perspective. Yeah. And from our perspective, we talk about it like that's the number one mindset you're going in there. It's design and build, right? One, we have to really purposely think about what are we designing for, and then we have to spend time building it, right? Because that's the other thing. We can sometimes think about there's wonderful strategies out there, but we kind of forget about that there's actual implementation. Mm-hmm. So that's really how, this has sort of played itself out, but thinking about it through that process and really encouraging people and giving them a process. We've come up with what to do is like, this is what we need to do. These are the processes we need to go through. And it's not that hard, but it does take some work.
Speaking of, do you by any chance have any recent examples of some of the work you've done? You don't need to name names, of, a place where you went in and you did design and then they did build and they had a positive outcome.
Yeah, there's many. And it's interesting, we've kind of worked with the clients who started this process sort of 1 year into COVID. And then, I'm thinking about a multinational large insurance organization who kind of came at it when we thought we were slightly coming out of it, which was like the post first lockdown.
That's right.
Here in Australia. And, they went through a process, thought about it, kind of had a design and a strategy. We went through a process of enabling their leaders and giving their leaders some tools. And then one of the other two things that we have always kept pretty consistent through this whole thing, there's two principles in this design and build process, right? One's co-creation and another one is experimentation, right? Reality is we are doing something completely brand new at scale. And so they really went down that path, the co-creation process of engaging their people, engaging their leaders, engaging all their staff, and really taking the time, even though they are absolutely massive multinational, understanding that it's going to be different and it's got to play itself out differently depending on one culture, geography, type of work to be done, all that type of stuff. And so, but the second one is experimentation. So we did that work sort of post first lockdown. We then learned some stuff. So we went back in after everything was done. We're like, right. Well, everything was done. We were out of lockdown and we were like, okay, what have we learned through this period? What is actually different? So they moved from completely individual led to more a team led side of things, right? Yep. So going, okay, health and safety and everything else was whatever you needed to. Now we kind of knew that we needed to actually have a team-based perspective on it. And I think that's another really big thing. And was really happy. Gallup's done a study recently globally. And, it's been what we've been suggesting and talking about since 2015, that this is a team-based conversation. Yep. And now their research is showing that we have some of the best results and people are the most happy with the outcome. And there's the highest levels of compliance if the design is done at a team-based level. So, it was wonderful to kind of see them go through pivoting a little bit, shifting a little bit. And I'd probably say, we've been with them for such a long time. We'll go back again and go, okay, what have you learned in the last little while? Mm-hmm. What's working? What's not working? What can we shift a little bit? And again, but the principle and the process is exactly the same.
So spoken like a true engineer there. I feel like I'm hearing some agile. I'm hearing some testing, some iterating. I'm hearing the whole cycle. That's really cool. I think that you really do bring this unique perspective to hybrid work, and I'm excited to share it with our audience. Let's see. So something else I read was that you definitely think work should definitely be tied to company values. For instance, so what I was thinking about actually, so if you have something I'm working on right now at Skeda, so if we have flexibility and autonomy in our values, then it makes a lot of sense to offer that in our actual work options. And so that got me thinking. And then also the tools to support it, right? To make people successful. So tell me a little bit about, did I kind of hit the nail on the head there of just kind of tying values to work options? And does that make sense? And then what about for a company that doesn't have values that are so closely aligned with the options? What do you do then?
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating question. So when I talk about culture, one of the models around how some of the thought leaders think about and talk about culture that I love using is, because I think it just makes so much sense. It isn't this nebulous thing, but it makes it very practical, is Carolyn Taylor's Walking the Talk is the name of her book. She's incredible. And she talks about the fact that culture, all the culture is company values that get brought to life through behaviors, systems and processes and symbols, right? So I'm like, great. Now we have an absolute model for almost operationalizing culture, right? So every single organization, as far as I'm concerned, culture shouldn't be a nebulous thing, but should be going, if this is what we believe in, this is who we are, how are we every single day? Let's say for you, it's, flexibility, for example. How are we bringing that to life in our behaviors? How are people behaving in a way that's flexible? I mean, if you think about it, even going back to what you said, an approach to design of hybrid, is it rigid? Or are we flexible about how we're designing that as well? Because if we're living in that type of time of agility, then we can't have these rigid processes, in my view, in our perspective as well. Mm-hmm. So, how are we seeing that in the symbols and processes, or systems and processes? Are they flexible and in our symbols? So let's say we talk about, because one of the things that we do in helping clients implement their hybrid and flexibility overall is say, you need to create a high level. The first process is create some clarity for people of what good looks like. And that isn't about rigid rules, but that is a set of principles about how you want people to think about this, right? As they're going and designing and building their hybrid, they need to think about it. And so those principles are critical. Those principles should be embedded in your values. If your value is customer service, let's say something that we know happens all the time, right? Well, then probably one of the principles that needs to come of that values is, we design how we work to make sure that they're in the interest of us and our teams, but they also are about doing the best for our customer. So when I'm considering how I'm going to work, I need to make sure that that customer is never impacted. And if anything, I'm actually doing a better job for my client and my customer. Mm-hmm. So does that make sense?
Yes.
It is still really kind of testing every single one of those principles. Are we bringing our values to life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's just a guide.
There will come a time when your CEO will ask,
So, how are people responding to the new hybrid work policy?
and I'm here to make sure that you have an answer that's a little better than,
I don't know. I mean, Greg gave me a high five after lunch, so I guess that's cool.
With Skeda, you can get a ton of insights into how your space is being utilized. See the office's busiest and quietest days, which users are the most active in office, and when meeting rooms are being underutilized, and much, much more. Maybe a certain desk is being booked solid day after day because it's the only desk with 2 monitors. Or you need to know what day of the week to host your event. Whatever it is, make your decisions data-backed by using the Insight tab of your space scheduler. Skeda, hybrid work, people first.
Yep. And I love what you said too about behaviors also being part of the culture and the values. I'm someone who cares a lot about satisfying people's behavioral profiles at work and making sure that they have, ample time for in-person collaboration or heads down work, depending on their behavioral style. And also something that you said that stood out to me was that we tend to think that innovation comes from collaboration only, versus wrestling with an idea on your own, uninterrupted. So how do you think that manifests itself in this hybrid work world? How can people have that top of mind? Because I think that does impact whether people are going to adopt it or not, is whether their behavioral styles are kind of acknowledged.
If I think about the way we've designed our framework for the implementation, right? The first step of the whole framework, we talk about it is clarity, autonomy, accountability. Those are sort of the 3 steps. And clarity, again, going back, is about what does good look like. So every single person inside the organization needs to have a very, very good idea, very clear idea down to their role about what is expected of me in terms of outcomes, right? What does good look like? So organization, in that clarity piece, the organization is going to give me a set of principles, which is just a guardrails for me to think, how do I need to think about this? That is bringing the culture of the organization to life and all that type of stuff. The step after that is I need to get together with my team and we design some ways of working together. What does good look like for us? What are we doing? What are our critical moments? All those types of conversations, what is the best way for us to not just, there's an operational cadence, I guess, then there's sort of a regular cadence, is it critical because of something that's going on or is it time-based? So we design all those things. And then I have a one-on-one conversation with my leader. And that part is, I think, where that comes to life, right? So I have all these almost filters I'm thinking about. But the next thing is, what about me? And you're right. It's behavioral styles. It's about how are you going to get the best out of me, knowing my chronotype, my behavioral style, whatever's going on personally for me in my life, but also what is the work that I'm actually doing, right? Some roles, and I love that. I mean, Carl Newport talked about it in Deep Work. Every single one of us should have a conversation going in the job for me, to deliver the outcomes that I need to deliver. 60% of what I do is deep work. And by the way, I do that deep work really, really well at 5 o'clock in the morning, or like me at 10 o'clock at night. So what is the best way I know that we don't have all that freedom, and there's meetings and there's clients and all kinds of other stuff.
Right.
But within the ability of what we can, how do I design how I work to get that time protected? And again, being at home might not be the right call for everybody to do deep work. Some people might have little kids or, elderly parents that are living with them, all kinds of other things. Maybe it's going into a co-working space or even into the office, into a meeting room, whatever that is. So it's just really kind of going through that process and creating some of that clarity for people. I definitely think we can do a much better job than we do today in that conversation.
I love that. So starting at the organizational level, but then, going, narrowing that in and to down to the individual eventually is really what's going to make the most sense. I thought that was really well said. Something else that you said was that the office should be a tool to operationalize. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, to operationalize your culture and your values. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on that? Because I thought that was also a very interesting way of phrasing the office as a tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that perspective, I guess. And as you said, we talked about it a little bit, but it's that perspective that if the way that we work is, even that in itself is a tool for us to deliver on our mission, to live our culture, to really bring out who we are. Well, what role does the office play in that, right? How can the office help us, whether that's underpin, using Carolyn's model, systems and processes that we go through in a better way, in a more cohesive way, maybe in a more effective way? Is an office a place for symbolism, right? So, the things that are plastered all over the wall, or how we celebrate things, how we connect, because we know when, humans are humans, even though sometimes we don't really kind of think it is, human connection and relatedness, let's say, in self-determination theory is one of the things that motivates us. So how do we create a space to create that connection? It's the number one thing people will come into the office, right? It's not collaboration.
100%.
It's nothing else.
Right.
It's connecting with others. So how do we use that office as a tool to deliver on that? But, once you start at that high level, like, what are we even trying to achieve here? What am I trying to do? Then you can think about, how does the office play a part to deliver on whatever that is for you?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
We call it collaboration, but it's really just seeing your friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It can sometimes play out actually a little bit counterintuitively. And I'll just give an example because it's been such an interesting thing seeing it play itself out, right? So we have a number of clients that we're just starting some work with, and they were actually pretty good in terms of trying to think about, how do we intentionally have the time together and what do we do with that time? Mm-hmm. But one of the learnings that they've had is, so they decided that they're going to come in for 2 days a week, and that the thing they're going to prioritize is meetings in that time. So when they're together, we're going to actually, really get in a room and have all our team meetings and all our one-on-ones in that time, which kind of sounded like the right idea. And I get where they were coming from, right? And I would probably say a lot of organizations out there are still doing the exact same thing. Well, you learn very, very quickly, first of all, because 99% of the time, not everyone can actually be in there that day. So there's still someone coming in remotely, right? So you're still dealing with hybrid. That means that all your meetings have someone remote and somehow you end up back to back to back to back to back. And what they were saying, I'm running like a crazy person from meeting room to meeting room to meeting room. I can't just turn off and turn it on now and Zoom, but I actually have no time between. And because I'm so back to back to back, the meetings are just as sort of operational as they were when they were online, right? We get in, we get out. And all that stuff around connection actually is not playing itself out at all. So, it's quite interesting how that kind of comes out. So our actually recommendation these days is when you're in together, if you're going to decide you're going to bring people together, clear the day of meetings, leave unstructured time, leave time for chat. For, hey, I forgot to talk to you about that thing. Can I just talk to you for a second because I'm not in a meeting?
Yep.
Can we have a coffee? And by the way, coffees together, important work.
Yes.
We have to reframe that.
Yeah.
So yeah. I thought that was such an interesting tiny little tidbit that plays itself out of the right kind of intention, but didn't work out in the end.
I couldn't agree with you more. I wrote a post a long time ago about the office drive-by, how we used to just walk by each other's offices, and in whatever 5 minutes that we talked, it was usually enough to do something really huge. It would actually spark an idea or get something moving that wasn't moving, and it was just 5 minutes, and it was just a drive-by, and those don't exist anymore. That's another reason that I love this idea of unstructured time together, because that is what we need. We need to turn our brains off. Our brains are actually still working, but we don't think it's work. So
yeah.
So speaking of mistakes, a lot of our audience members really like to hear about when things go wrong so that they don't make the same mistakes. Are there any others that might come to mind that you've seen?
Yeah, I think I can't help but talk about, and we sort of mentioned it slightly before, but maybe I'll just go into a little bit more, is organizations who think that just having a mandate of a number of days in the office is where the work ends, right? Mm-hmm. So we have had organizations who we've watched kind of their journey, who went completely individual led and then gone, not working at all because everybody's just doing everything. There's no connection. Some are coming in, others are not. We're not getting any of that. So the solution for that is we're going to just say everybody has to be in the office 2 days a week. And then that's the work end. And it's really, and I understand the frustration, I guess, when you've given zero clarity, right? Because I sort of said, well, what do you expect of people? If you're not going to give them any kind of clarity of what good looks like, or maybe some principles about how they need to think about it, or encourage them to have those team conversations, we're humans. We're going to do what works for us, right?
Yeah.
It's completely fair and completely logical, right? People almost take it kind of personally that people didn't think about the organization when they've given them no context. So, and then, the flip side is, the solution will be 2 days in the week. And there was a study done, I think it was now last year, but I honestly think it would still apply, is that one of the most disengaged employees are those that are coming into the office and they're sitting on Zoom calls all day or Teams.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. That people who are coming in without any reason actually why, that those days are not designed at all. So their teams are coming at different times, people are cross, and all they're doing is commuting to sit in a place where they're not going to be as comfortable, let's be honest, not going to have access to their snacks or, out to nature, all that kind of stuff. And we're not getting any of that wonderful stuff of actually being together. So that's probably my number one mistake. I'm not saying, by the way, and I really want to be clear about that not giving people a guide, I wouldn't say it's a rigid rule. Mm-hmm. Like we've just worked with an organization, and they're a smaller organization, for what they're doing this year, for the amount of change that they're going through, for their culture, for all kinds of reasons. They've sort of given this guide 2 days a week. We would love actually people to be 2 days a week. But by the way, this is how we're designing those 2 days. This is what we want you to think about it. And it's not black and white. We get it. You have lives, you have everything else, but this is how we're going to think about it. So it's not the issue of giving that guide. It's stopping the work at just that mandate is the issue.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense to me. I think people need more guidance than ever. I think this is so brand new that people don't even understand that when they're home, there's still work hours, right? I had to set expectations early on about what working from home looked like, right? So I think this is the exact same thing. Now we're going back to the office. Well, what does that look like? That's really great. So I like to ask everybody who I have on the show if there was something that you wanted to say when you arrived that I didn't ask the right question to actually get that from you. There's always something in there that I just didn't ask the right question for.
Ooh, I kind of feel like we got to cover a lot of the stuff.
Oh, good. Well,
yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say is more than this is just going back to that experimentation. And I think it's something that you just said. I think it's such an important point. We're not going to get this right. It doesn't like all the time and right away.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. Right? There are many organizations that are going to go through this process. And as I said, we've learned through this process and even working through the organizations that we might not get it right. I would just really, really, really encourage people to just sit with it and stay with the process and try something else. You know, in our framework, the clarity, autonomy, accountability piece is more about actually just a process of review. You know, how are we coming together? How are we owning the success of all of this? All of us, by the way, not HR or people on culture or even head of remote, but all of us really own it. And how are we making it better? What are we trying? What are we kind of trying to figure this out? Through COVID, and I always remind, especially when we work with sort of C-suite levels and everything else, we had no playbook. We had no plan. They all went out there, right? And I said, did you have a project plan? And did you have best practice? Did somebody tell you? And all that kind of stuff. And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, so what happened? They're like, well, we kind of just tried stuff. And I said, okay. And did it go wrong? And I honestly have not had a single organization tell me that something really bad happened.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
All that happened is we experimented, we tried, and we learned from it. And then we figured out something else. Oh, that's not perfect. And let's do that. And it was a wonderful skill actually to learn. And I think we underestimate how important that is. So I would apply the same process. Let's forget best practice and projects and plans and everything else when it comes to this. Let's actually just come at it. And I love Adam Grant talks about it, the scientist mind. I like the engineering mind, but we're going to try, we're going to think about the principles and we're going to experiment a little bit and make it happen. So all I'm trying to say is even if it's not perfect, going back into the office 5 days a week, I'm still to come across an organization, one of our clients, I'm sure there are out there, where that is the right call and that removing all that flexibility from people because of the work that is left and that we need to be done. I just think it's we're not learning anything.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think you're right, especially for knowledge workers. There's obviously some industries that don't have the flexibility, but for tech especially, that doesn't seem to make a ton of sense anymore.
Yeah.
Great. So Maja, how can people find you?
Honestly, the easiest world is obviously online. So we've got a website, which everyone can go to, but I love LinkedIn. I think it's become a really fun community. So I'd probably say, LinkedIn is the other second best option. We're not necessarily the best at keeping the rest of our socials going. So I will be 100% honest because I just find in terms from a community and conversation perspective, LinkedIn seems to be really, really good. So I'd say those two things.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think LinkedIn, by the way, LinkedIn is the right place for you. Your whole target audience is there. I don't even know why you would leave or go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that's where we live too. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It really was a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you.